Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Nature channel. Tonight, we're going somewhere very special, not far away, in fact, as close as just below your feet. Beneath every garden, every meadow, every quiet forest, there is a whole secret world that almost nobody ever sees. It is soft and dark and full of tiny living things that spend their whole lives helping each other, sharing food, sending gentle messages through the earth. It is the world of soil, and the magical thread-like fungi that weave through it like the most patient, most generous network you could ever imagine. Come with us. Let's sink down into the ground together, slowly, softly, and discover what the earth has been quietly doing all this time. Take a slow breath in and let it out. Feel your body get a little heavier, a little warmer. Let your shoulders drop. Tonight, there is nowhere to be and nothing to do. Just this, the slow, beautiful world under the earth, waiting for you to notice it. Imagine you are lying in a meadow on a warm afternoon. The grass presses softly against your back. The sky above is pale blue, and there is just a little wind, barely enough to move the tops of the wildflowers. Birds somewhere far away, a bee passing slowly by. Everything is still and unhurried. Now imagine sinking just a little, not in a frightening way, more like the way you sink into a very comfortable bed. The earth below you is soft and dark, and it smells like rain and roots and something ancient and good. This is the smell of healthy soil, and it is one of the oldest, most comforting smells in the world. The very first thing you notice as you settle into the earth is that the soil is not just dirt. It is not empty. It is full of space and air and water and life. Every handful of healthy soil contains more living things than there are people on the entire planet. And most of them are invisible to the eye. They are so small, so quiet, so perfectly suited to their dark and gentle world. The soil breathes in its own way. Water moves through it slowly, finding the paths of least resistance, winding between particles of sand and clay and broken leaf. Air pockets hold tiny reserves of oxygen, and through all of it, life hums along at a pace so slow it almost feels like stillness. One of the first things that lives in the soil is something so small you would never see it without help. Bacteria. Billions and billions of them clustered around the roots of plants, busy with their invisible work. They do something extraordinary. They take gases from the air that plants cannot use, and they transform them, slowly and quietly, into forms that plants can drink up through their roots. Without these tiny workers, most plants could not grow at all, and the plants, in return, send something back. Through their roots, they leak a little sugar, the sweet result of all that sunlight they have been drinking in up above. The bacteria gather around these sweet leaks the way animals gather at a water hole. Everything is an exchange. Everything is a gift given and a gift received. The soil particles themselves are worth a moment of attention. Some are tiny grains of sand, smooth and pale. Others are fragments of clay, flat and microscopic, that hold on to water and minerals the way a sponge holds water. And some are something called humus, the slow, dark gift of leaves and twigs and creatures that have lived and gently returned to the earth. Humus is soft and rich and dark as chocolate. It is what makes good soil smell so good. Between all these particles there are tiny channels, like hallways in a hidden building. Water moves through them, air drifts through them, and roots push through them. sometimes slowly, over days and weeks, finding their way deeper into the dark. There are also, in this quiet underworld, creatures larger than bacteria, tiny mites, so small they are almost invisible, wander the soil landscape like explorers crossing a vast and varied country. They eat fungi and bacteria and tiny scraps of plant material. They are fastidious and unhurried, these little mites, spending their whole lives in a world no bigger than a teacup. And there are springtails, if you know where to look. These tiny, soft-bodied creatures jump when disturbed, using a little spring-like mechanism tucked beneath their bodies. Most of the time, though, they do not jump. Most of the time, they simply walk slowly and carefully through the hallways of the soil, eating and being and going about their quiet lives. If you find yourself comfortable, if your breathing has slowed a little, that is perfect. There is no rush here. The soil is patient. The soil has been patient for a very long time. Roots, when you really look at them, are extraordinary things. The big roots you can sometimes see near the base of a tree are just the beginning, the highways. From those large roots, smaller roots branch off, and from those smaller roots, even smaller ones, thinner than a hair, branching and branching until they form a cloud of fine threads reaching through the soil in every direction. A single ryegrass plant, the ordinary grass you might walk past without a second glance, can have roots that, if you laid them end to end, would stretch for 400 kilometers. Root tips are very sensitive. They respond to the feel of the soil around them, to the chemistry of the water moving past, to the presence of minerals they need. When a root tip meets a stone, it grows around it. When it finds a pocket of good minerals, it branches and branches, filling that rich space. It is not random wandering. It is listening and responding. And at the very tips of the finest roots, there is something that looks a little like fur. Tiny, delicate hairs, each one barely a millimeter long. These are root hairs, and they are where most of the plant's drinking happens. They press against the soil. They absorb water molecule by molecule, mineral by mineral. They are so fragile that they only last a few days before new ones grow to replace them. All around these root hairs, the soil is alive with activity. Bacteria, fungi, tiny animals, all of them drawn to the warmth and the chemical signals coming from the root. This zone around the root has a name, the rhizosphere. It is one of the most active, most alive places on Earth, and it sits just beneath your feet, quietly busy right now, wherever there is a plant growing. If you have a garden, even a pot of something green on a window step, this is happening beneath it, right now, this very moment. Now, resting here in your soft darkness, let us follow something new, something that is perhaps the most beautiful discovery that scientists have made about the soil in the last few decades. It is a network, a web, a system of exchange so generous and so intricate that people who study it sometimes find themselves simply sitting with wonder. It begins with fungi. You might know fungi as the mushrooms you see in the forest after rain, those quiet, rounded caps pushing up through the leaf litter. But the mushroom is only the smallest part of the fungus. The rest of it lives underground, invisible, in a web of threads so fine that 1,000 of them laid side by side would be about as wide as a single human hair. These threads are called hyphae. and they grow slowly and persistently through the soil, branching and dividing, filling the dark spaces with their network. One kind of fungus does something particularly remarkable. It finds the roots of plants and grows right into them, or sometimes around them, forming a partnership so close, so old, and so beneficial to both sides that it has lasted for hundreds of millions of years. This partnership is called mycorrhiza, from the Greek words for fungus and root. The fungi that form these partnerships are called mycorrhizal fungi, and they are extraordinary. Here is what happens. The fungal threads, those impossibly fine hyphae, push out from the plant's root into the surrounding soil. They go places the root itself cannot go. They squeeze into gaps between soil particles too tiny for even the finest root hair. They spread out over a vast area far beyond what the root alone could explore. And as they travel, they gather water, phosphorus, zinc, nitrogen, minerals that the plant needs but cannot reach on its own. Then the fungus carries these things back through its network of threads to the root. And the plant, in return, sends the fungus a share of the sugar it has made from sunlight. It is a perfect trade. The plant gives carbon, energy, and receives minerals and water. The fungus gives minerals and water and receives carbon, energy. Each one has what the other needs. Each one has what the other lacks. This partnership is ancient. The oldest plant fossils we have found, plants that were just beginning 450 million years ago to grow on dry land, already show evidence of fungal partnerships in their roots. It seems that plants may not have been able to make the move from water to land without the fungi to help them. The fungi were there first, already at home in the soil, already knowing how to navigate the dark and the dry. And the plants came alongside them, and together they made the world green. If you feel your eyelids growing heavy, that is good. That is the body doing what it does best, resting, restoring, settling. The world outside will wait. The fungi have been patient for 450 million years. They can be patient a little longer, but here is where it becomes even more extraordinary, because the mycorrhizal fungi do not just connect one plant to one plant's roots. They connect many plants, many plants. The network of hyphae spreading through a forest floor can link dozens of trees and hundreds of smaller plants into a single shared web, a web through which not just minerals and water flow, but something very like communication. The trees of a forest, it turns out, are not the isolated competing individuals they might appear to be from above. Below the ground, many of them are connected. A large old tree, sometimes called a mother tree or a hub tree, is often connected to many of the younger trees around it through the fungal network. And through this network, the large tree can actually send sugar to the small ones growing in its shadow, where there is too little light for them to make enough food on their own. This was one of those discoveries that stopped scientists in their tracks. Trees sharing food with their neighbors. Older trees sending resources to younger ones. The forest floor, this dark and quiet place, turned out to be not a battlefield, not a competition, but something much more like a community. Think of the network like this. Imagine each tree as a lamp in a city, and imagine the fungal threads as the wires running under the streets, connecting all the lamps to each other. If one lamp is struggling, if it is not getting enough power, the network can redirect some energy toward it. The city lights stay on. Of course, it is not quite as simple as that. Trees are not consciously being generous. The fungi are not making decisions. It is all chemistry, all physics, all the slow and ancient logic of living systems that have evolved over millions of years to work together. But the effect, when you look at it from the outside, feels very much like kindness. And there is more. When a plant is damaged, when a caterpillar begins to eat its leaves, for example, it produces chemical signals that can travel through the fungal network to nearby plants. These plants may then begin to produce their own defensive chemicals before they are attacked. They receive a warning through the web, and they prepare. Scientists have called this the Wood Wide Web, a name that makes people smile and perhaps feel a little differently about the quiet forest floor the next time they walk through a wood. If you would like to tell us your favorite thing about the hidden world of forests, please leave a comment below. We love reading what you share. Now, let us think for a moment about the feel of the soil itself, not the biology of it, just the sensation. Dark, slightly cool, moist, but not wet. There is a texture to it, a looseness in healthy soil that comes from all the life living in it. Earthworms are a big part of this. As they move through the soil, they swallow particles of earth, digest what is useful, and leave behind their castings, a form of soil that is richer and more open than what they started with. An earthworm tunnel is a permanent channel through the soil, a passage for air and water and roots. Where earthworms are plentiful, the soil is more alive, more open, more welcoming. Earthworms also bring organic matter deeper into the soil. Fallen leaves on the surface get pulled down into the earthworm's tunnels, slowly, leaf by leaf, over the autumn and winter. What was once a crisp, dry leaf becomes part of the dark, rich humus of the deep soil. Everything is always becoming something else. Everything is always on its way. The smell of the soil, that particular rich, earthy scent, has a name and a source. It comes largely from a chemical called geosmin, produced by certain bacteria in the soil. These bacteria thrive in healthy, moist, well-aerated soil. And when rain falls, it disturbs the soil surface and releases geosmin into the air. That is the smell after rain, petrichor, some people call it, the scent of the earth breathing out. Scientists have found that human noses are extraordinarily sensitive to geosmin, far more sensitive than to many other chemicals. We can detect it at tiny, tiny concentrations. Some people think this sensitivity may have evolved because the smell of moist, healthy soil was, for our ancient ancestors, a signal of places where food and water could be found. The earth's smell is coded into us as something safe, something good. If the smell of rain on dry earth makes you feel calm, now you know why. The fungi that form mycorrhizal networks are not all the same. There are hundreds of different species, and they fall into a few broad groups with different ways of connecting with roots. Some of them grow between the cells of the root, never actually entering the cells, but wrapping around them in a fine net. These are called ectomycorrhizal fungi, and they tend to partner with large trees, oaks, pines, birches, beeches. If you pick up a mushroom in a forest, there is a good chance it is the fruiting body of an ectomycorrhizal fungus connected underground to one of the trees nearby. The mushroom is the fungus's way of spreading its spores, its equivalent of a flower. The other major group actually enters the cells of the root. They push through the cell wall and form tiny branching structures inside the cell, structures that look, under a microscope, like little trees. These are called arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, from the Latin word for small tree. They partner with the majority of plants, grasses, herbs, wildflowers, crops, garden vegetables. Almost everything that grows in a meadow or a vegetable bed has these fungi growing in its roots right now. What is wonderful is that these fungi cannot live without their plant partners. They have become so specialized over millions of years of partnership that they can no longer make their own food from the environment alone. They need the sugar that the plant provides. They are, in a sense, dependent on the relationship, just as the plant is dependent on them. The partnership is so old and so deep that neither side can easily live without the other. This is what mutualism looks like when it has had 450 million years to develop, not one using the other, but both needing each other, both giving, both receiving. If you enjoy these stories, please check out our playlist of sleepy nature stories. There is always something quiet and wonderful waiting for you there. Let us drift a little deeper now. Imagine the network itself, not the trees, not the roots, but the threads. A single teaspoon of healthy forest soil contains kilometers of fungal hyphae. Kilometers in a teaspoon. They are so fine, so light, so constantly growing and branching that they fill the soil like a soft mist made solid. Every direction you look, if you could look at this scale, there are threads passing beside soil particles, winding around root hairs, bridging the gap between one root and the next. The threads grow at their tips. The rest of the thread is more or less stable, but the tip pushes forward, always forward, feeling its way through the soil. It responds to chemical gradients in the water around it, moving toward nutrients, away from toxins, toward the signals of plant roots. There is no brain guiding this movement. There is no decision being made. But the result, over time, is a network beautifully suited to its purpose. When two hyphae from the same fungal species meet, they can fuse together. They merge their cytoplasm, the fluid inside their threads, and become continuous. This is how the network grows larger. This is how it becomes, in a sense, one organism, spread through the soil, many threads, but one being. The question of what an individual is in the fungal world is a surprisingly difficult one. A single mycelial network, a single connected web of hyphae, might spread over many hectares of forest floor. It might be hundreds of years old. It might weigh more than any tree above it. Is that one organism? In some ways, yes. In other ways, it is a community, a collective, something that does not quite fit the way we usually think about individuals. The largest known fungal network, an armillaria fungus in the Blue Mountains of Oregon, covers about 2,400 acres of forest and is estimated to be thousands of years old. It is, by many measures, the largest single organism on Earth, and it lives almost entirely underground, almost entirely invisible. Let your breathing slow a little more, in and out. The soil is still around you. The threads are still growing in their patient, unhurried way. There is nothing to do tonight but rest and notice. Plants communicate their needs through the mycorrhizal network, but the conversation is chemical, not verbal. A plant under stress, perhaps not getting enough phosphorus, increases the production of certain compounds in its roots. These compounds signal to the fungal network that more phosphorus is needed. The fungus, in response, may increase the growth of hyphae in that direction, or may redirect some of the phosphorus it is transporting to that root. It is all automatic, all chemistry. And yet, when you describe it, it sounds so much like something else, like a quiet conversation between neighbors, like one person saying gently, "I am struggling a little," and another person responding, without fanfare, "Here, let me help." The soil is full of these quiet exchanges, bacteria and fungi trading molecules, roots and fungi trading sugar for minerals, earthworms and soil particles in a slow, physical conversation that turns leaf litter into life. Everything giving, everything receiving, everything connected to everything else, if you follow the threads far enough. This is one of the reasons why healthy soil is so important, and why losing it, through heavy plowing or chemicals that kill the fungi, or compaction that closes off the air channels, is such a slow and serious loss. When the fungal network is damaged, the trees above ground may seem fine for a while, but something has gone quiet beneath them. Something has been unplugged. And over time, the trees may grow more slowly, struggle more in drought, be more vulnerable to disease. The visible world above depends, in ways we are only beginning to understand, on the invisible world below. If any of these ideas have sparked something for you, please leave a comment. We love hearing what you find most wonderful. And don't forget to like this video if it's helping you rest. Some plants, over long ages of evolution, have become very particular about which fungal species they partner with. Orchids are a striking example. Orchid seeds are extraordinary for their smallness. They are like dust, containing almost no stored food at all. When an orchid seed lands on the ground, it cannot grow on its own. It has no reserves to draw on. It must, very quickly, find a mycorrhizal fungus to partner with. And not just any fungus, often a very specific species. If the right fungus is present in the soil, the seed will germinate. The fungus will provide it with carbon, actual food, while it is still too small to make its own. The orchid, for a time, is entirely dependent on its fungal partner. It is not yet giving anything back. It is simply receiving, growing, slowly developing, until the day it is large enough to push its first green leaf up into the light and begin making its own food from the sun. Some orchids remain in this dependency for years before they break the surface. Years in the dark, fed by fungi. And some orchids never develop the ability to photosynthesize at all. They spend their entire lives underground, or nearly so, always dependent on the fungal network for their energy. They are, in a sense, fungi masquerading as plants. They have become so specialized in receiving that they have lost the ability to make. These fully parasitic orchids are rare and extraordinary. They bloom briefly, a few purple or pale yellow flowers rising from the leaf litter, and then retreat back underground. Most people never notice them. They live almost entirely in the hidden world. The seasons change the soil. In summer, the soil is warm and active, full of bacterial activity, the hyphae growing at their fastest pace. Insects burrow deeper in search of moisture. Roots push further into the earth. The whole underground world is busy. In autumn, The trees pull back. They draw the sugars from their leaves before they fall, leaving the leaves thin and pale. The leaves drop, and the soil receives them. Bacteria and fungi begin the slow work of breaking them down. Beetles and millipedes and woodlice chew them into smaller pieces. Earthworms pull the fragments underground. Over months, what was once a leaf becomes part of the humus, part of the dark richness that holds the memory of every leaf that has ever fallen in that place. In winter, the soil does not sleep exactly, it slows. The bacteria are less active in the cold. Some fungi rest, but the soil itself, the structure of it, the channels and the humus and the minerals, is still there, still holding, still waiting. The mycorrhizal networks do not entirely disappear. They go quiet, perhaps. They wait. And in spring, when the soil begins to warm, the whole system wakes again. The bacteria multiply. The fungal hyphae begin to push their tips forward again. The plant roots, sensing the warmth and the lengthening days, begin to grow again, pushing out into the soil, finding the fungal threads that were waiting for them. The whole conversation resumes. This is the deep rhythm of the earth. Not just the seasons above ground, but the seasons below. The slow pulse of a world that has been doing this, breathing in and out, warming and cooling, growing and resting for hundreds of millions of years. Feel that rhythm if you can. The long, slow breath of the earth, in, out, season to season, generation to generation, leaf to humus, humus to leaf. There are fungi in the soil that do not form partnerships with plant roots. They are decomposers, specialists in breaking down what has died and returning it to the soil. Without them, the forest floor would slowly fill with dead wood and leaf litter, the nutrients locked away in a form that plants cannot use. The decomposers open the lock. They release the minerals. They make the dead available to the living again. Some of these decomposers work on wood, the toughest, most resistant material in the forest. Lignin, the compound that makes wood hard, is extraordinarily difficult to break down. There are very few organisms on Earth that can do it. Certain fungi are among them. Over months and years, they grow into the wood, secreting enzymes that slowly dismantle the lignin and cellulose, turning hardwood into soft, dark material, what foresters sometimes call punky wood, and eventually back into soil. A fallen tree in a forest is not just a dead thing. It is a habitat for hundreds of species. Insects lay their eggs in it. Mosses and ferns colonize its surface. Birds probe it for larvae. And through it, quietly, the fungi spread, breaking it down from within, returning its material to the soil from which it will eventually grow again. A fallen tree in a healthy forest may take a century to fully disappear. A century of slow transformation, a century of feeding and sheltering and gradually becoming earth. The forest keeps everything. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is thrown away. Everything is in the process of becoming something else. If you are still with us, sinking softly into your own quiet rest, we are glad. The soil is glad too. These stories belong to the night, to the slow moments before sleep, to the gentle dark that holds us. Let us think about water in the soil for a moment, just to feel the coolness of it. Rain falls. It lands on the leaves first, if there is a canopy, and runs down the leaf surfaces and the branches and the trunk, arriving at the soil more slowly than if it fell directly. By the time it reaches the soil, it has gathered a little from the leaves it touched. A little potassium, a little carbon, a little of the chemistry of the air. At the soil surface, the rain either soaks in or runs off, depending on the health of the soil. Healthy soil, with its network of channels and its living root systems and its earthworm tunnels, is remarkably good at absorbing water. The water sinks in quickly. Poor soil, compacted soil, soil where the biological structure has been broken, cannot absorb water as well. The rain runs off, carrying precious topsoil with it, and the earth gets drier faster than it should. Once inside the soil, water clings to the surfaces of soil particles by a thin film. It fills the smaller pores between particles. It moves slowly downward, pulled by gravity, and also sideways, pulled by the surfaces it clings to. It follows the channels left by roots and earthworms, and as it moves, it carries dissolved minerals with it, feeding the bacteria it passes, nourishing the fungal threads, eventually reaching the roots of plants. A plant's root does not just wait for water to arrive. The root creates a gradient. The concentration of water inside the root is lower than in the soil around it, so water is drawn in passively through the root hair membranes. It is a simple physical process, elegant and quiet. The plant does not have to pump. The physics of water does the work. The mycorrhizal fungi, we said, can reach further into the soil than the roots alone. But there is another way they help with water, a way that becomes especially important in drought. When soil dries out, the thin films of water clinging to soil particles shrink. The pores empty. The pathways that water takes through the soil become interrupted. And for a plant depending on its own roots, this is a serious problem. The roots can only absorb water where they touch it, and as the soil dries, there is less and less water in those places. But fungal hyphae are so fine, so much finer than root hairs, that they can reach into the very smallest pores, the last places where water still clings. They can find water in soil that a root alone would experience as completely dry, and they carry that water back to the root. This is one of the reasons why plants with healthy mycorrhizal partnerships tend to survive droughts better than plants without them. The fungi extend the plant's reach into the drying soil, finding the last reserves, carrying them home. In a changing climate, where droughts are becoming more frequent and more severe in many parts of the world, this partnership becomes more important than ever. The fungi that have been helping plants survive for 450 million years may be part of how plants and the forests and meadows and grasslands they make survive the changes coming. The oldest partnership on land may be one of the most important things we have. Please share this video with someone who loves nature or who might enjoy a quiet story before sleep. Every share helps us keep telling these gentle stories. Let us move now toward stillness. The soil is all around you, dark, patient, alive. The hyphae are growing in their slow, determined way. The roots are listening. The bacteria are busy with their invisible work. The earthworms are moving through their tunnels in the dark. You are resting in this world, this quiet world beneath the world, and it is holding you. The earth has always held everything, every tree that has ever grown, every flower that has ever opened, every creature that has ever walked or crawled or burrowed. The earth holds them all in the end, and in holding them, transforms them and makes them new again. There is something deeply restful about this, the knowledge that nothing is lost, that the minerals in a leaf that falls today may one day be part of a wildflower, may one day be part of a tree, may one day be part of a bird that sings in that tree on a morning you never see, in a year you cannot imagine. The matter of the world moves around and around in slow cycles, and the soil is where much of that cycling happens. You are made, in a sense, of things that have been through the soil. The food you eat comes from plants, or from animals that ate plants. The plants drew their minerals from the soil. The minerals came from rocks and leaves, and the bodies of creatures that lived long ago. You are connected through this chain to everything that has ever lived on this planet. The fungi that are growing in the soil right now are distant relatives of the fungi that helped the first plants move from the sea onto the land. The fungi that, in a sense, made the terrestrial world possible. It is a long story, a very long, very patient story, and you are in it. One last quiet thing before you rest. There is a phenomenon in the soil that researchers have only recently begun to understand, and it is this. Trees that are about to die sometimes send a large pulse of resources through the fungal network to the trees around them. As if they know, as if in the chemistry of stress and decline, they are releasing what they have, sending it outward through the web they have been part of their entire lives. The carbon and the minerals that have accumulated in their roots over decades flow outward one last time to the trees that will remain. Whether this is intention in any meaningful sense is not something we can know. The trees have no brains. There is no moment of decision, and yet the effect is real. The network carries the gift. The neighboring trees receive it. There is something in this that asks for quiet contemplation. In the last moment, giving. In the last exchange, generosity. Not because anyone decided to be generous, but because that is the way the system has always worked. Give and receive. Give and receive. Everything moving slowly in circles. Outside your window tonight, if there is soil nearby, if there are trees or plants or a patch of grass or a garden, this is happening right now, in the dark. The hyphae are growing. The roots are listening. The network is carrying its quiet messages and its gentle gifts through the earth. There's a kind of fungus that glows in the dark, not brightly, not the way a lamp glows or a screen, more like the way a coal glows when it is almost out. A faint, soft, greenish light, barely enough to see by, coming from the mycelium itself. The network of threads spread through decaying wood on the forest floor. If you walked through a forest at night, and your eyes had fully adjusted to the darkness, and if you knew where to look, you might see it. A faint shimmer among the roots and the leaf litter, like a breath of cool light. This phenomenon is called bioluminescence, and in fungi, it is not fully understood even now. Scientists know that the light is produced by a chemical reaction involving compounds in the fungal tissue, and that it requires oxygen. They know that the light is real and consistent and can last for days. What they do not know entirely is why. Some think it may attract insects in the night, insects that might carry spores to new places. Some think it may simply be a byproduct of the chemistry of decomposition, a side effect rather than a purpose. Perhaps it is both. Perhaps it is something else entirely. What we do know is that there is something quietly astonishing about the idea of the forest floor glowing very softly in the dark while you sleep. While the owls hunt and the stars turn overhead, the fungi are there in the leaf litter and the rotting wood, tending their slow work and glowing just a little, for reasons that may have nothing to do with anyone watching. There are about 100 known species of bioluminescent fungi in the world. They live mostly in tropical and subtropical forests, though some occur in temperate regions too. Many of them are very small and easy to miss even in daylight. But at night, in the dark, they are briefly, quietly extraordinary. The wood they grow in is sometimes called foxfire, an old word from before people knew what caused the glow. People walking through forests at night would see it and wonder. Some were frightened. Some were curious. Some simply accepted it as one of the many quiet mysteries of the dark places. Now we know what it is, mostly. And it is still wonderful. The chemical reactions that produce bioluminescence in fungi are different from those in fireflies, or in the deep-sea creatures that make their own light in the dark of the ocean. Life has invented its own light several times, independently, in very different forms, which tells you something about how useful a little light can be in a dark world. But the fungi do not seem to use their light the way fireflies do, not for signaling to a mate, not for hunting, not for any immediately obvious purpose. They just glow steadily, patiently, the way fungi do most things. The soil around bioluminescent fungi does not glow. It is the mycelium itself, and particularly the growing tips of the hyphae, where the light tends to be brightest. The newest growth, pushing forward into new wood, catching the dark with its faint green light. There is something you might do very gently before you go to sleep tonight. Close your eyes and imagine a forest floor at night, the dark shapes of the roots, the soft mounds of leaf litter, and here and there, in the quietest corners, against the old wood and the damp soil, a faint shimmer, barely there, barely visible, steady as breathing. That is the fungus doing what it does. Patient, old, glowing just a little, asking nothing, watched by nobody. Good. Let that image sit with you. Let it be very still. The soil is full of light, even in the dark. You just have to know where to look and how dark to let your eyes become. In the world of soil, there are partnerships even more intricate than the ones we have already visited. There are bacteria that live not just near plant roots, not just on the surface of fungal threads, but inside the fungal threads themselves. Tiny bacteria living inside the hyphae of mycorrhizal fungi, traveling with them through the soil, sharing in the exchange of nutrients, adding their own small chemistry to the conversation. This is called endosymbiosis, life within life. And it is extraordinarily common in the biological world. The cells of every plant and animal on Earth contain structures called mitochondria, which were once, long ago, free living bacteria. They were incorporated into cells billions of years ago, and they never left. They became so essential that they are now a permanent part of every living cell, generating the energy that keeps everything running. The bacteria inside fungal hyphae may be heading in a similar direction. They have, in some cases, already lost many of the genes that free-living bacteria need because those genes are no longer needed. The fungus provides. They are becoming slowly, over generations too many to count, part of the fungus itself. Life within life within life. each layer dependent on the others, each one giving something, each one receiving something. When you try to think about where one organism ends and another begins, in the soil, the question becomes very soft and blurry. The bacteria inside the fungus inside the root inside the tree inside the forest. Where is the edge? Where does one end and the next begin? Perhaps there is no clean edge. Perhaps living things are always, to some degree, composed of other living things, living in relationship, shaped by relationship, dependent on relationship. The soil makes this visible if you look. Everything down here is entangled with everything else. The soil scientists who study these relationships sometimes say that the soil is not a place where organisms live. It is itself an organism, not in a mystical sense, not in a way that implies consciousness or intention, but in the sense that the whole system regulates itself, maintains itself, responds to change, and recovers from disruption, like a body, like a breathing, metabolizing, endlessly self-repairing body. If you are still awake, and if this thought is turning gently in your mind, that is all right. Let it turn. You do not have to solve it. The soil has been holding this question for a very long time, and it does not seem troubled by the not knowing. Neither should you be. Rest now settles in, just as minerals settle slowly through the water column of the soil, taking their time, finding their places, everything where it belongs. Spring in the soil begins before spring in the air, weeks before the first flowers open, before the first buds swell on the trees, before you can smell any change in the wind. Deep in the soil, something is already shifting. The soil temperature, which dropped slowly through autumn and winter, begins to climb again. The sun is higher in the sky each day, and even though the air is still cold, the earth absorbs the warmth and holds it, and slowly warms from within. The bacteria feel this first. Their metabolic processes, which slowed almost to stillness in the deep cold, begin to speed up. They begin to divide. They begin to consume and produce and transform again. And as they do, they release tiny amounts of heat themselves, which warms the soil a little more. The fungal hyphae follow. At the growing tips of the mycelium, the movement begins again, a slow pushing forward through the soil, feeling for the mineral gradients and the root signals that were faint or absent in the cold. The network, which was not broken but merely quiet, begins to hum again. The plant roots, sensing the warmth and the new activity around them, begin to put out new root hairs. They grow toward the fungal threads. The reconnection happens quietly, without ceremony. One thread meets one root hair. The chemical signals are exchanged. The partnership resumes as if it never paused. All of this happens below the frost line, below the frozen surface, in the zone where the earth is still just warm enough. By the time the first snowdrop pushes through the frozen ground above, the network below is already awake, already working, already sending the first trickles of phosphorus and water up toward the root that supports that tiny white flower. The snowdrop does not push up on its own. It is lifted in a sense by everything below, by the fungi that have been waiting, by the soil that held it through the cold. When you see the first flowers of spring, you are seeing the visible result of a great deal of invisible work that has already been going on for weeks, underground, in the patient dark. This is a thing worth carrying with you, Most of what makes the beautiful things possible is invisible and has already happened long before you see the result. The flower is the last step, not the first. There is a plant, a small, unassuming plant, that grows in certain places in North America and goes by the name ghost plant or ghost pipe or Indian pipe. Its scientific name is Monotropa uniflora, but its common names are more evocative because the plant is genuinely strange to look at. It is entirely white, not pale green, not cream, truly white, the color of candle wax or of bone. It has no green at all. This is because it has no chlorophyll. It cannot photosynthesize. It does not collect sunlight. It lives entirely in the shade of deep forest, and it gets all of its energy not from the sun, but from the fungal network around it. It is connected to mycorrhizal fungi, which are connected to the trees, and it takes carbon from this network without giving anything back. It is, in the technical language of biology, a mycoheterotroph. In less technical language, it is a plant that has given up the sun and chosen, instead, to live entirely on what the forest shares. The ghost pipe looks, when it pushes up from the leaf litter, exactly like its name, a small, curved, entirely white stem with a single drooping flower at the tip, like a tiny pipe or a ghost's hand reaching through the dark earth. Groups of them sometimes emerge together in a cluster from the same spot of forest floor, all white, all slightly translucent, all nodding in the same direction. They are real. They are common enough in the right forests. But they are so unlikely looking that people who first see them often wonder whether they are seeing a mushroom or a fungus or something that has lost its way from a different world entirely. The forest is full of these unexpected things, organisms that have found an unusual solution to the problem of living, plants that gave up light, fungi that gave up independence, bacteria that gave up freedom and moved inside. Life is enormously creative, given enough time. It will try almost anything, and if it works, if it leads to eating and growing and eventually passing on offspring, then it stays. The forest floor holds the results of all these experiments, quiet and patient and often very strange. If you love strange and wonderful things from the natural world, please leave us a comment or check our playlist. There are many more quiet corners to explore. The underground world changes completely after rain. Before rain, the soil is drier, more compact in the upper layers. The bacteria slow down when there is less water available. The fungal tips grow more slowly, searching harder for moisture. The roots pull hard against the dry soil, drawing in what little water clings to the particles. Then the rain comes. The water arrives at the soil surface and begins to move in. In healthy soil, it sinks quickly through the channels left by roots and earthworms, moving down through the upper layers in ribbons and sheets. The bacteria, encountering water after a dry period, spring into sudden activity. Their metabolic rate jumps. They begin to multiply. The whole upper layer of soil becomes briefly, intensely alive. The fungi respond too. The growing tips, suddenly encountering moisture, push forward faster. The chemical signals that roots send through the water, signals that say, "I am here, come toward me," become clearer, more concentrated, easier to follow. Connections that were stalled resume. New connections form. And earthworms, which retreat deeper during dry periods to find moisture, begin to move back toward the surface. After a long rain, they sometimes emerge from the soil entirely. You have probably seen them on paths and pavements after heavy rain, looking slightly bewildered. They are not lost. They are simply moving through a world that has temporarily become fully fluid, seeking the right balance of moisture and air that earthworm life requires. The smell, that geosmin smell, that deep, rich, rainy smell, rises from the soil as bacteria release their chemical signals into the newly wet air. It is a smell that tells of life restarting, of water arriving, of the whole underground system shifting into a higher gear. No wonder it feels like relief when we smell it. It is relief, relief that has been the signal of water and life and growth for as long as noses have existed. After a good rain, the soil is the most alive it will be for days. Then it will slowly dry again, and the pace will drop again, and everything will quiet until the next rain comes to wake it. There is something in the soil that scientists call the biological soil crust, a living layer, often only a few millimeters thick, that forms on the surface of dry soils in deserts and grasslands and open places where little else grows. It is made of bacteria and algae and tiny mosses and fungi, all bound together in a thin, fragile skin over the earth. The crust holds the soil together. Without it, the soil surface is loose, and the wind can carry it away. Dust storms, the kind that darken the sky for hundreds of kilometers. With the crust, the soil stays put. The crust is glued by threads of cyanobacteria and fungal hyphae, which wind through the upper particles of soil like the threads of a very thin piece of fabric. The crust also brings nitrogen from the air, the same kind of work the bacteria in root zones do. Cyanobacteria in the crust can take nitrogen gas from the atmosphere and convert it into a form that plants can absorb. In deserts, where there are few other sources of nitrogen, the crust may be the most important source of this essential nutrient for whatever plants do manage to grow. The crust is extraordinarily fragile. A single footstep can crush it, breaking the threads that hold it together, leaving a bare patch that may take years to recover. In places where many animals or people walk, the crust disappears. And without it, the soil erodes. And without the soil, the plants struggle. And without the plants, the animals struggle. The whole system depends on this thin, invisible skin, easily broken, slowly mended. Many of us have walked over biological soil crusts without knowing they were there. In deserts and grasslands, if the ground looks faintly dark and slightly rough, not smooth and pale like bare sand, that darkness and roughness may be the crust, the living membrane of the dry earth, worth walking around if you know it is there. Somewhere in a forest you have probably walked through, there are trees that are linked to each other by the fungal network. And among them, there may be trees that are related, that grew from seeds dropped by the same parent tree, or even that sprouted from the same root system. Trees can sprout from their own roots. In certain species, aspens are among the most famous examples. A single root system can send up dozens, hundreds, even thousands of individual trunks. What looks like a forest of separate trees may be, underground, a single organism. The trunks are genetically identical. They share the same root system. They live and die together. The largest aspen grove known, called Pando, lives in Utah in the United States. It covers about 43 hectares. It has around 47,000 trunks. And all of those trunks belong to one individual, one root system, one genetic identity, one living being that has been growing in that place for perhaps 80,000 years, perhaps longer. Above ground, the trunks look like a forest. They are green in summer, gold in autumn, bare in winter. They are home to birds and insects and fungi and all the usual inhabitants of a woodland. But below, it is one thing, one patient, ancient, slowly spreading thing. The mycorrhizal network threads through the soil of Pando, connecting the trunks to each other even further than the shared root system already does. Resources move through both routes, through the roots and through the fungal network, in a system of sharing and exchange that has been running slowly and continuously for longer than recorded human history. When you think about what ancient means in the natural world, it is easy to think of mountains or of rocks or of the slow movement of continents. But Pando is ancient in a different way. Ancient in the way of living things, ancient in the way of a being that has been breathing and growing and responding to the world for tens of thousands of years and is still here, still alive, still putting out new leaves every spring. Please share this story with someone who loves trees, or someone who might look at a quiet forest a little differently after tonight. The soil remembers, not in the way that brains remember, not as images or words or experiences, but in the way that a landscape remembers, in the chemistry of it, in the structure of it, in the organisms that are present and the ones that are absent. A soil that has been covered in forest for 1,000 years holds the memory of that forest in its fungal community, in its humus, in the particular mixture of minerals that forest roots have left behind over centuries. If you clear that forest and try to grow something else, the soil will resist gently in its chemical way. The wrong fungi will be present, the wrong bacteria. The pH will be wrong. The humus will slowly change as the new plants change what falls and what decays. Eventually, the soil will adjust. Given enough time, any soil will shift to reflect what lives in it and on it. But it takes time. Generations, decades, sometimes centuries. Old-growth forest soils, the soils beneath forests that have never been cleared, are different in measurable ways from soils beneath forests that were cut and regrew. The fungal communities are richer. The web of connections is more complex. There are more species, more kinds of relationships, more redundancy in the system, so that if one fungal species declines, another can take its role. The older the forest, the richer and more complex its soil. The soil of a truly ancient forest is an accumulation of ecological history, layer upon layer of relationships built and rebuilt over centuries, a palimpsest of life written in chemistry and thread. This is one of the reasons why old-growth forests are so difficult to restore once they are lost. You can plant the trees again, but the soil will take generations to become what it was. The memory of the forest is in the ground. Let us visit, for a moment, the edges of things, the places where one kind of soil meets another, where forest meets meadow, or meadow meets wetland, or wetland meets dry upland. These edges, ecologists call them ecotones, are among the most interesting and most alive places in any landscape. At the edge where forest meets meadow, two very different soil communities exist side by side, and between them there is a gradual transition. the deep shade of the forest gives way to open sky. The leaf litter of the forest gives way to the grass roots of the meadow. The ectomycorrhizal fungi of the forest trees give way to the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi of the meadow grasses. In the transition zone, the actual edge, a few meters wide, species from both communities overlap. Plants that can tolerate some shade and some sun grow there. Fungi that are flexible enough to partner with both grasses and shrubs extend their threads into the transition. Animals move through it, carrying seeds from one side to the other, depositing them in new ground. The edge is a place of mixing and meeting. It is often where you find the most species, because it is where two rich communities overlap. A bird that needs the open sky of the meadow for hunting, but the dense shrubs of the forest edge for nesting, will spend its life in this narrow strip. An insect that needs the flowers of the meadow for food, but the cool damp of the forest floor for laying its eggs, will move back and forth across the boundary every day. The soil at the edge holds this richness. The fungal community is more diverse. The chemical gradients are complex. Water moves differently here, flowing from the shaded, moisture-retaining forest side toward the more open, drier meadow side. The edge is never in equilibrium. It is always in motion, always being renegotiated between the two communities on either side. In a way, the edge is the most honest place in any landscape. It shows you the living boundary between two worlds, always shifting, always alive, always more interesting than either side, alone. And now, very gently, let us come to rest. You have traveled far tonight, further than you might have thought possible, without moving at all. Down through the layers of leaf litter, into the humus, through the rhizosphere where roots and bacteria and fungi meet, along the threads of the mycorrhizal network as it carries its slow gifts from tree to tree. You have visited the glowing fungi in the dark wood, the white ghost pipes reaching through the shadows, the ancient aspen breathing with one slow breath through 47,000 mouths. You have touched the edges of things, the places where one world meets another and something new grows in the meeting. All of this is happening right now in the soil outside, in every garden, every park, every patch of earth where something grows. The network is awake and moving. The bacteria are busy. The fungi are finding their slow, patient way through the dark. And you are resting. Let your body be heavy. Let your thoughts move like water through soil, slowly, finding the path of least resistance, settling into the deeper places. You do not need to solve anything tonight. The soil has been solving things for hundreds of millions of years, and it will continue without your help, with great gentleness and great patience, through the night and through the morning and through all the seasons that follow. Breathe in the imagined smell of the earth, deep, rich, dark, like rain and roots and old wood and something ancient and safe. Let it settle in your chest. Let it be the last thing you notice. The mycelium is threading through the dark. The roots are listening. The earth is holding everything. The trees above, the seeds waiting, the creatures sleeping, and you. There is a word, a Japanese word, that has no perfect translation in English, though people have tried. The word is Shinrin-yoku, and it means, roughly, forest bathing. Not swimming in a forest, not washing in one, but bathing in the sense of immersing yourself, walking slowly through trees, breathing the air, letting the light come through the canopy in pieces, letting your nervous system settle into the frequency of the forest. It began as a practice in Japan in the 1980s, but the experience itself is as old as human beings. Every person who has ever walked slowly through a quiet wood and felt something release in their chest knows what it means, even without the word. What science has found in recent decades is that part of what happens during forest bathing may come from the soil itself. The forest air is full of compounds released by the trees and the fungi and the bacteria in the soil, volatile chemicals that drift upward through the leaf litter and the tree roots and into the air between the trunks. Some of these compounds are released by mycorrhizal fungi as part of their normal activity. Some come from the trees themselves. Some come from bacteria in the humus. Among them is a class of compounds called phytoncides, aromatic chemicals that trees produce, which drift into the forest air. These compounds have been found in studies to reduce levels of stress hormones in the people who breathe them. They appear to calm the nervous system in measurable ways. They may even affect the immune system, nudging it toward a state of quiet readiness. And beneath the phytoncides, beneath the tree smell and the fungal smell, there is geosmin again, that ancient compound of the healthy soil, that deep earthy note that noses evolved perhaps to recognize as a signal of safety and abundance. Breathe it in, and something old in you relaxes. The forest is, in a sense, medicating the air above it, not intentionally, not in any conscious way. But the chemicals that trees and fungi and soil bacteria produce for their own purposes happen, by some fortunate overlap of chemistry and biology, to be good for the bodies of the creatures that walk beneath them. There is a long, wordless history between human beings and forests. For most of the time our species has existed, forests were home, the place where food grew, where shelter could be found, where the air was clean and the water came up cold from the ground. The deep comfort we feel walking among trees may not be learned. It may be remembered. The soil is part of that memory. The smell of the earth rising slowly through the forest floor is part of what tells the old part of you that you are somewhere safe, somewhere alive, somewhere that has been alive for a very long time and will go on being alive long after tonight. Take a slow breath in. Imagine that smell. Let it reach the old part of you. Let it say what it has always said. You are home. Rest. In a handful of dry desert soil, something extraordinary waits. It does not look like much. Pale, fine-grained, almost weightless in the hand, but sealed within it in a state of suspended animation so complete it is almost indistinguishable from death, are fungal spores that may have been waiting for decades. Some may have been waiting for a century. They are intact. They are alive, in the way that a held breath is alive. They are simply waiting. Fungal spores are among the most durable living things on Earth. They can survive extreme heat and extreme cold. They can survive being carried in the upper atmosphere. Scientists have found living fungal spores drifting in the air more than 10 kilometers above the ground, in the thin, cold layers where almost nothing lives. They can survive the vacuum of space, at least for short periods. They are built for waiting, for surviving the in-between times, for outlasting whatever difficulty the world presents. When rain finally comes to the desert, Sometimes, after years of absence, the spores respond within hours. They absorb water. The suspended chemistry of dormancy reverses, and the spore begins to grow. A tiny thread pushes out, feeling for soil particles, for root signals, for the chemical markers that say a plant is nearby and a partnership is possible. In a desert, after rain, the soil comes alive faster than you might expect. Within days, invisible films of bacteria and algae spread across the wet soil surface. Within weeks, fungal threads are threading through the soil between the roots of the plants that the rain has also woken. The system reassembles itself with remarkable speed, as if it had been waiting, for exactly this. The spores in dry soil are a kind of library, a record of every fungal species that has ever grown there, held in suspension, waiting for the right conditions to become themselves again. Even in a desert that has been dry for years, that library is there. The potential is there. Life is patient in a way that is sometimes difficult to fully grasp. This patience is worth sitting with for a moment as you rest. The spore does not struggle against the dryness. It does not try to grow before conditions are right. It simply holds itself in readiness, intact and still, for as long as is needed. There is no urgency in the spore. There is only waiting, and then, when the time comes, growing. That is not surrender. That is a kind of wisdom so old it predates anything we might call wisdom. It is just the way life works. In the dry places, hold, wait, and when the rain comes, grow. Below the reach of roots, below the zone where most fungi live, the soil gradually becomes something else. The particles are more tightly packed. Less air moves through, less water, less life, but still not nothing. There are bacteria that live deep in the earth, far below where plants grow, in the dark and the pressure and the cold. They are called deep subsurface bacteria, and they live lives almost inconceivably slow by the standards of the surface world. Some of them may divide, reproduce, create a new cell, only once every 1,000 years. They eat almost nothing. They move almost not at all. They have slowed their biology down to something just barely above stopping, and they have been there for a very long time. Some of the bacteria found deep in ancient rock formations are thought to be genetically isolated from the surface world for millions of years. They have been dividing and slowly changing in their own deep, quiet way, separated from all the drama of the surface, the extinctions and the ice ages and the eruptions and the warm interglacial periods, by hundreds of meters of rock and earth. Life at this depth is life at its most essential, stripped of almost everything we usually associate with living. No movement to speak of, no eating in any recognizable sense, no response to light, since there is none. Just the slow, minimal process of existing, maintaining the chemistry of life at the edge of what life can be. These bacteria are not struggling. They are not suffering the deprivation of the deep. They evolved for this. This slow, pressured dark is their home, as perfectly suited to them as the forest floor is to the fungi, as the sunlit leaf is to the bacterium that lives on its surface. Every depth has its inhabitants. Every extreme has found its life. The earth is alive all the way down, in its own ways, at its own pace. The roots go down as far as they can. The fungi go a little further. The bacteria go further still. And somewhere below all of that in the rock itself, something is still, just barely alive. You do not need to go that deep tonight. You are already exactly deep enough, resting where you are, in the warmth and the quiet. Let the deep earth be as deep as it needs to be. You are close enough to the surface to feel the warmth of it. That is enough. Truffle hunters in Italy and France know something about the mycorrhizal network that most people do not. Truffles, the ones that chefs pay extraordinary amounts of money for, are the underground fruiting bodies of certain mycorrhizal fungi. They form only where those fungi have established deep, old partnerships with the roots of particular trees, oaks, hazels, sometimes lindens. The fungus lives in the root, and the truffle forms underground, round and dark and intensely aromatic, sometimes at surprising depth, sometimes just below the surface. The truffle has no way to distribute its spores the way an above-ground mushroom does. It cannot open a cap and drop them to the wind. So, instead, it produces a smell. Not just any smell, one of the most complex and powerful smells in the natural world. The smell of a ripe truffle drifts up through the soil and into the air, and it is detectable by the right noses from some distance. Pigs were used for centuries to find truffles because pigs have extraordinary noses, and because the chemical compounds in truffle smell are similar to compounds naturally produced by pigs. The pigs were enthusiastic hunters, too enthusiastic. They would often eat the truffle immediately upon finding it. So now, in most places, trained dogs have taken their place. Dogs can be taught to find the smell and then sit and wait rather than eat the prize. But the truffle's real audience is not pigs or dogs or truffle hunters. It is the wild boar, the deer, the rodents that snuffle through the forest floor in autumn. These animals dig up the truffle and eat it, and the spores inside pass through their digestive systems unharmed and are deposited later some distance from where the truffle was found, in a new place, in new soil, where, if the right tree roots are present, a new mycorrhizal partnership might one day begin. The whole elaborate chemistry of the truffle's smell, so complex that it has never been fully synthesized artificially, exists for this purpose: to get from one place to another, underground, in a network that cannot walk. The fungus makes itself irresistible. The animal finds it. The partnership moves. It has been working this way for a very long time, long before anyone thought to train a pig. The forest has its own commerce, its own way of moving value from place to place, without markets or roads or any of the things we have built to do the same. Just smell and appetite, and the long, patient business of spreading. If this story is settling you gently toward sleep, please do like this video. It makes a real difference to us, and our playlist is always there whenever you want to return. The last thing we will think about tonight together is very simple. It is just this: the ground beneath you, wherever you are. If you are inside, in a bed, on a sofa, in any room of any building, then below you there are floors, and below the floors there are foundations, and below the foundations there is earth, real earth. Even in the densest city, even under concrete and steel and centuries of building, the earth is there, underneath all of it, waiting. In the parks between buildings, in the thin strips of soil along roadsides, in the planted boxes on balconies, in every crack where a weed pushes through pavement. The soil is finding its way. The fungi are threading through what space they have. The bacteria are busy in the small pockets of organic matter they can find. Earthworms have been found in city soils, in gardens in the middle of dense urban neighborhoods, quietly doing what earthworms do, as if the city were simply a new kind of landscape to move through. Life adapts. Life finds the available space and fills it. The mycorrhizal network cannot stretch under streets of concrete, but it can exist in every park, every garden, every planted median, every tree pit in a pavement. And where the network exists, even in small and fragmented pieces, it is working, connecting what can be connected, sharing what can be shared. The trees in city parks are often connected underground through the fungal network to the trees in neighboring gardens, and through those to the next row of street trees, and so on. A fragmented, interrupted, but real and living network threading its way through the city's green spaces. The city has a hidden biology, an invisible web spread wherever there is earth and root and the patient thread of mycelium. Think of this, wherever you are tonight. Below you, somewhere, even if it is deep below, the earth is alive. The fungi are there, the bacteria are there. The slow, ancient, generous exchange is happening. The world is being held together by things too small and too quiet to notice, in ways too old and too patient for any single lifetime to fully witness. And you are resting on top of all of it, held by it, part of it, in the sense that everything that has ever lived is part of the same long story, the same minerals cycling through, the same carbon passing from air to leaf to soil, to root to air again, age after age after age. You are made of things that have been through the soil. You will return things to the soil in time, in the slow and patient way of all living things. But not tonight. Tonight, you are here, warm and resting, and the earth is below you, and the network is humming its quiet chemistry, and there is nothing, truly nothing, that needs doing right now. There is a moment in the life of a seed that almost nobody witnesses. The seed has been sitting in the soil, perhaps for a few weeks, perhaps for a season, perhaps for years in the case of seeds that can wait. It has been still, sealed, holding everything it needs in a coat of remarkable toughness. Rain and cold and heat have passed over it. The seasons have turned. And then, one day, something shifts. The soil temperature reaches a certain point. The moisture level tips past a threshold. A chemical signal, perhaps from the roots of a plant nearby, perhaps from the bacteria in the water around it, tells the seed that now is the time. And the seed opens. Not all at once, and not dramatically. It is the slowest kind of opening, a softening of the coat, a swelling of the tissues inside, a tiny root emerging and turning immediately and without hesitation downward, not toward light, not toward warmth, downward into the dark, following the pull of gravity with a certainty that seems almost like purpose. This first root, the radical it is called, is the seed's first act in the world. Before a single leaf has formed, before any part of the plant has reached toward the sun, the root goes down. It finds the soil. It begins to explore. And within hours of that first root emerging, the mycorrhizal fungi in the surrounding soil have detected it. They have sensed the chemical signals leaking from the fresh root tissue. Signals that are, to a mycorrhizal fungus, something like an invitation the fungal threads begin to grow toward the root. They will arrive within days. The partnership will form before the seedling has even fully emerged from the ground. The plant begins its life already in relationship. It has never known the soil alone. From its very first moment of rootedness, it is part of the network, connected through the threads of fungi to every other plant nearby that shares the same fungal partners. It enters the conversation that has been going on around it the whole time it was waiting, sealed in its coat. There is something in this that feels worth knowing. The plant does not first establish itself alone, prove itself sufficient, earn its place, and then join the network. It joins the network first. The support is there from the beginning. The connections form before they are even needed. The community reaches toward the newcomer before the newcomer can ask. The oldest trees in a forest were once seeds in the soil, and the fungi that are connected to them now were connected to them on the first day of their rooting. Some of those fungal partnerships have lasted for centuries. The same network that holds the old trees held them when they were seedlings, small and fragile, just finding their way in the dark. If you are someone who has ever felt that you needed to manage alone before you could accept help, that you needed to be established before you could belong, the soil has something quiet to say to you. The seed does not wait. The network reaches first. Rest with that if it is useful. Let it be simple and soft. The root goes down, the fungi arrive, everything else follows. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consider the particular darkness of the soil. It is not the darkness of an empty room or the darkness behind closed eyes. It is a full darkness, a darkness inhabited in every direction, cool and slightly compressed, and smelling of everything that has ever lived in it. A darkness that is also, in its way, a kind of light, because within it, the chemistry of life is always producing small amounts of energy, passing electrons from molecule to molecule in the slow metabolic transactions that keep living things alive. If you could be very, very small, smaller than a grain of sand, smaller than a bacterium, and you could float in the water film that clings to a soil particle somewhere beneath a meadow tonight, this is what you would perceive. The particle curving enormously above you, dark and rough as a cliff face. Other particles at a distance, like hills in a landscape. Between them, the water, thick with dissolved minerals, with fragments of organic molecules, with the chemical signals of roots and fungi and bacteria going about their business, and moving past you through the water, the slow traffic of the soil's commerce. Phosphate ions drifting toward a root, carbon compounds leaking from a root hair. A fungal hypha pushing its tip between two particles, growing perhaps a millimeter per day, unhurried, certain of its direction. A bacterial cell dividing slowly in the rich zone near a root. Everything is slow at this scale. Everything is close. The distances that matter are measured in micrometers, and the time that matters is measured in hours and days rather than seconds. The soil world is profoundly, essentially slow. It operates at a pace that has nothing to do with urgency, nothing to do with speed. It has never needed to be fast. It has only ever needed to be persistent. This is the final gift the soil gives, perhaps the one that matters most tonight. The reminder that slow is not the same as stopped, that quiet is not the same as empty, that the most important things, the building of networks, the formation of partnerships, the patient work of turning dead matter into living soil take time, long time. The kind of time that cannot be hurried, only trusted. The mycorrhizal network did not form in a season. It formed over years, over decades, over centuries in the oldest forests. Each new connection added carefully, one thread meeting one root, one exchange of carbon for minerals, one small confirmation that the partnership works. And from all of those small, slow confirmations, something vast was made, something that holds the forest up, something that carries gifts between trees in the dark. You do not have to build anything tonight. You do not have to become anything, or arrive anywhere, or finish anything that is not finished. The soil is doing what the soil does, slowly, persistently, without urgency, and you can rest inside that rhythm. You can let the pace of the deep earth be your pace, just for now, just for tonight. Breathe slowly. Let the darkness be full rather than empty. Let the quiet be inhabited rather than lonely. Somewhere below you, in the real earth, the hyphae are growing their millimeter per day. The bacteria are passing their electrons. The roots are listening. And you are here, warm and heavy and finally, peacefully, almost asleep. The soil has you. The network holds. Everything in its own time is growing. From all of us at the Sleepy Nature Channel, thank you for being here. If you are just discovering us, our full playlist of quiet nature stories is waiting for you whenever you need to return to this place. Leave us a comment. Tell us what the earth outside your window looks like tonight. We are always glad to hear from you. Sleep deeply. The world is patient and full of life, and it will all still be here in the morning.